Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the season 25 mid-season power ranking. I will try and keep this under 40 to 45 minutes just because this shit tends to go for a while, and most people probably don't want to hear more things than they need to. Last season's was nearly 2 hours. Now, to be fair, there was two of us, and we had one more person to cover. But at the same time, I have a couple things I'd like to address at the top of this, so I'm just gonna get straight into it. First thing to talk about is I want to discuss last season's predictions and how bad they aged. We made a chart a couple hours ago that should appear on screen in a second. Hopefully, if it's not there, then I'm gonna sound so stupid. But you'll see obviously on the left with the different colors, those will be the tribes, and you see numbered 1 to 12. That number symbolizes everyone ranked from 1 to 12, obviously, who I think is most to least likely to win. And then the number on the right side is the difference between their placement on the season and where I ranked them. So, for example, I said Zach was the most likely to win. He got 8th, so difference of 7. Easy. Um, it's very much so worth specifying that this is not a boot list prediction, because if that was the case, these would be looking very different. For example, I think I probably would have had Jonah making top 3 at least, but instead I had him 6 because his win equity wasn't as high as the top few people. But with that said, I guess it's just time to get into them all individually. At 12th, I mean, this opinion aged pretty well. I don't know why it wouldn't. It was pretty obvious that Jalen would be the Mulch boot last season. Um, it wasn't Obviously, there was the Dice Idol shenanigans to throw into that, which could have changed some things. I know Ren also had a different list from me, so it wasn't as cut and dry as I made it sound a second ago. But for the most part, it was a relatively obvious Mulch boot. I was correct on that. I do think this season might have a bit of the same, but I'll get to that when I get to it. Next up, okay, this is the first of many bad takes. I said Tuckle was the second least likely to win, which, I mean, I expected him to get all emotes, but I also thought if he made it far, he would be kind of a goat, just because at that point, you had so many people who had been rubbed the wrong way by them, and on top of that, just people mentioning them as a threat. Now, Tuckle kind of turns the game around at the Mulch, and did a very good job at doing so. Emerged as a contender, the number one, actually. The middle or so of the merge, but just based on their position going in, I think where I put them was fair. 10th, I had Beagle, who, yeah, I mean, of every take I give here, that was the one that aged the worst. I mean, 8 placement difference, but I'll stand by that one, given he would have been the merge, one of the early merge boots, if some things played out different. Ninth was Badger. I mean, that is one of 3 predictions I got exactly right. Okay, I guess not, because, like I said, this isn't a boot list, but there's no difference between how likely I put them to win and where they placed there. I was right on Badger. Uh, Minnie, I put him there, and much of my reasoning was that I thought one of that duo of Minnie and Beagle, one of them would go out early merge and the other would go pretty far. I just got the order mixed up and said Minnie would go farther and Beagle would go early. Obviously now we know the difference is that Beagle almost won the damn game, so yeah, I was pretty wrong on that one. And speaking of wrong, I not think Kai had much of a chance at all coming into the merge. I thought that, and I mean, I still stand by these. every single thing I said here, I think is 100% justifiable. But obviously, that just shows how much the game changes, especially on a season like that one. But yeah, I said Hyde didn't have much of a chance. Most of that is due to the fact that he just wasn't very strategically aware, and much of this wasn't exactly his fault, given, he actually had to, work a job outside of this shit, and he was often busy by deadline, which meant he wouldn't be brought into much of the last minute scrambling. So, I mean, I could have done worse with pricing high, but definitely should have put high, well, higher. Next up, I had Jonah, who before this point was definitely one of the bigger contenders, was hanging out around fourth on the ranking. But I had, at this point, we started to catch on that, hey, maybe Jonah could be FTC loser. And yeah, that's the timeline we got. 5, I felt very similar about Philium's position, but put them higher. Uh, was a mistake given how Phil did a very bad job managing the threat level, which I think someone who is very close to Phil has a very similar trajectory this season. So I'll get into them, I don't know, in 20 minutes. Fourth, I had Paint, who did get fourth, so that's nice. These top four are all players who were such. I mean, they were the big four of the season, the biggest players. Um, yeah, Paint was fourth. He had an idol of his own, then there was some auction idol, and then Palco's idol that he got at the merge. So they had a lot of power concentrated between them. Is just that I thought Paint had less win equity than Palco. Palco, I back to Paint. Sorry, I don't want to overlook that there was so many rounds pre-merge, namely, well, I guess only at the second swap and the fourth swap, where multiple people, almost these entire damn tribes, wanted to blindside Paint, but they couldn't really because of the idol. But anyway, uh, good segue into Palco, who was this duo. Yeah, Palco was always kind of the obvious player of the season, best positioned player. But I guess you can't say best positioned if he wasn't gonna make the end in most scenarios. But obviously the biggest threat, put him at the top for that reason. And then we had Jenny and Zach at 2 and 1. Amazing social players. They looked amazing strategically. Before they made some choice decisions at a couple points. Um, yeah, I stand by these choices. I think they were both positioned so well, and it's just a couple mistakes, namely a 3-3-2 at the final 8, leading to Zach being knocked out, and then Jenny voting herself out 2 rounds later for some fucking reason. Yeah, I had Jenny at second and Zach at fourth. So with that, adding up all the point differences, I didn't really know what to call that part of the chart. Well, I added up all the differences between placements and predicted spots. Just like, what am I gonna call that? So I just put it as total point difference. I came out to 42, which is pretty damn bad. But again, if it was a boot list, I think that number would be way lower. It's just different given the fact that this takes into account win equity to a massive degree. But with all that said, I think what I go from I'm not going to dive straight into the rankings for this merge cast because I want to touch on every single free module. Who some of them, most of them, I probably won't have too much to say because they all have quite similar trajectories. But as I get to each of them, whoever edits this should throw their cast reveal photos on the screen as they get to everyone, please. So editor will cut that in. You can read me saying this, and it doesn't matter. I mean, this shit is not professional. I'm just kind of talking on the microphone and hoping I am somewhat understandable. But the first boot of the season, Big Z. Yeah, that was kind of expected. Um, She almost drops the season. She gets out there, had some fun moments, but also like wasn't really in it too much. I mean, she couldn't even complete the force challenge, and by the end of Tribal, she basically told everyone, "Hey, vote me out." So, bad showing from the first ever nepotism pick for Fuzz season. I wish we got more out of her, but it's quite obvious why we didn't. After that, we had Jason, who was on the same tribe. Would have been the first boot in 9 out of 10 scenarios, just wasn't because Big D was on his tribe. I think Jason had some fun moments, like Big D did. It just unfortunately was never able to get much traction, either strategically or socially. After that was Jerry, who is pretty much the same case as Jason, where they were just kind of easily booted based on not being as social. Difference though is that Jerry at least tried a lot more. And I'll get into in-depth relationships and just more about their specific games when I do the postseason player ranking, which Legends, I swear that is coming one day. I just need to get the fucking motivation. Um, but yeah, now lost my train of thought. I, yeah, I got it back. We're gonna keep it pretty surface level for this. 15th, you had Cole, who great character. Reminds me a lot of B-Dog from Mementos, who is fucking casting gold. Great moments. I love how Cole starts off the season with a quite a positive episode, and then it's just a streak of negatives in the other 75% of the episodes he was in. Um, yeah, he kind of overplayed, made alliances with people that he didn't really check with them for, so that was pretty much instantly fell through. And some of his better connections through the likes of Barkle and I guess Alexander, which is not enough to carry him through much longer. Al was the 14th placer, and she was always the obvious backup target on the Pim tribe. Jerry was going to go first, and then it would be Val. Similar situation as it was with Big D and Jason. Now, Val did pick up a good bit socially by the end of the tribe, which did lead to her making the swap, which unfortunately she just didn't really have much momentum and it was easy to flip on. But she definitely picked it up a good bit character wise and strategically socially by the end of the swap. Well, okay, end of her run, because it was at the end of the start of the swap. Anyway, next up is Balkor, another person from the tribe Bell was on for the swap. Balkor is the first of two people to go out with an idol in his pocket. Now, to be fair, super circumstantial idol, given the fact that it was odds and evens, which we've only had once before. In season 18, Arcane, Benjamin had it. And you'll notice that last season, well, you probably forgot this, but last season I had an epiphany during one of these podcasts with Len where I said, "Hey, I want to bring back the odds and evens idol." So we did, and it didn't do anything because someone went out with it in their pocket. So the odds and evens idol is gonna be coming out again one day. This shit would be back until we get a good, at least an interesting outcome. Because I think it has quite an interesting advantage. We're just not really getting much out of it, unfortunately. Um, don't expect it season 26, or just don't expect it. Because if you expect it, then we can't do it. So it's gonna happen eventually. And then finally, the final pre-module. Uh, it's a very unfortunate scenario to lose Preston when we did. I mean, obviously, one of the main characters of the season was going to be locked in for DVD cover. If honestly they just made the merge, or maybe single digits. They had the idol in their pocket. They had great social standing on the initial Pim tribe, but unfortunately they were just kind of deemed as a threat due to being one of the most social players while also being seen as a bit shady strategically, and that perception carried over into the swap where he and the two pimps he swapped over with I mean, they were in a pretty obvious minority, and one of them had to go, and the other two took the opportunity to flip on Preston and secure their spot in the march. But with that, we have gotten all the preliminary stuff in about 15 minutes. Actually, this video shouldn't be that long, which is awesome. Well, okay, it's gonna be at least 30 minutes, but it's not gonna be 2 hours like last season. Again, just much less to talk about given the smaller scale season. It's not a legend season. There's less people, less pre-modules. There's only 2 of us going over the rankings. You know how it is. And also, I'm trying to keep stuff more concise, so I have more to say in other videos. Give me a second to pull up my chart, because I accidentally deleted the tab a minute ago, so I'm fucking awesome for that. Okay. At 11th, I mentioned how last season I had a pretty obvious Marge boot in Jalen. I think that is the position Typo has coming into this Marge. Now, specifically, as I said, this is not like a boot list or anything, but at least now that we have a substantial evidence to point to Typo being the Marge boot, I figured I'll throw them down in the Marge boot position. I think some people who I will get to soon have less win equity. One person, namely. Again, we got to get at least one prediction exactly right. Typo bounds out the bottom. In terms of specific game, Typo's momentum through the season has actually been pretty good. Out on to just outside of the contenders for essentially the first 5 episodes. Then things started to get shaky, and then things started to get more shaky, and now we're at the launch with them playing super aggressively out of nowhere and kind of throwing up their spot. Having the rivalry, rivalry, fucking hard ass word to say, with Yali, another hard ass word to say, is not a good thing for them. If the votes end up between the two of them, Yali is just gonna idle Typo out. If not, Typo might just be unanimous vote. I mean, they're just burning their connections with so many people. Not a good thing. Beyond that, I just think Typo's play has been messy recently. If they get out of this round, I don't think they have much more time left in them. They do at least have Bass trying to keep them safe, which is good. And then next up, 10th, I just referred to one person having less win equity than Typo. That person is Knight. Yeah, Knight's kind of been on the bottom this entire game. She did get very lucky with the swap, where she was placed with her 3 closest allies, who kind of carried her through it. But those same 3 allies also talked about, hey, maybe we could reach an agreement to cut her and go into merge with more potential allies. They didn't do that, but part of the reason why they kept her was 2 options. They could take her into the end for an E to beat, which is the win equity point, and 2, she could be an easy early merge boot who everyone can agree on, buy some time, and also secure a good Joey vote at the start of the merge. So I think, I mean, honestly, Knight could kind of place anywhere from like 3rd to 10th. She could lose with 0 votes. She could be taken out at 6 to break up the power that some of the bigger threats have. She could be 10th, that's consensus. She could be anywhere. And a reminder to throw her photo and everyone else's photos up on the screen when I talk about them. I don't know why. If I had my camera on, you would see me like making a box with my hands. I don't know why I'm doing that. I did that last time. I don't know why my brain is going though. I talk with my hands. This would be a fucked up video podcast. You don't want to see that. If you want to see that, you're not getting it. So yeah, fucks to be you. I said fucks to be you. I don't know how that happened. But before I get too off track, coming up In ninth, we have Bass, who I mentioned a bit ago when I talked about Typo. Bass is going to try hard to get Typo to stay. Oh man, my mic cut out. Okay, awesome. Don't even cut that out. That's funny. But Bass is going to try to get Typo to stay, which is going to throw back on Bass because, like, why are you trying to keep the obvious target? Bass also is doing a pretty terrible job keeping up the final two with Yali. These two should be so unbelievably locked in because they were so close socially at the start of the game. And then they had one round where they did not agree during the swap, and then it's all just been gone from that point. Yalvi's idol has been leaked by Typo and Bass. It's just Bass is pretty much setting himself up to be expendable for all of his big allies, which is just not a good thing. And I also think he lacks win equity. Now, those three, Bass, Knight, Typo, are kind of the bottom tier of the ranking. So we're going to transition into the next tier, which has three people, like the first. And this one comes out with Alexandra at 8. And I think Alexandra's position coming into this merge is very, very, very similar to the position Phil went into the merge in last season, which I mentioned when I talked about Phil at the top of the video, that games just have so much similarity, and also they're close friends, so it's funny how that works out. But the thing with Alexandra is she has a good social foundation and good positioning, but she's also pushing her stuff pretty aggressively, quite a bit more than Phil even was. And this is just gonna blow up on her around like the mid merge, even maybe even the early merge, and she's just gonna be such an obvious target who people are trying to weaken her, and she's gonna keep getting her way, and then eventually everyone's gonna say, okay, well, we can't have that, and they're gonna cut her out. Um, I do think she's a fun character. I think she's had a lot of great moments, and we also see she is putting good work in at the start of the merge, but I think that good work is also kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that um it's too obviously good work. I mean, she's trying to construct this mega alliance with all the gay people on the tribe, which, considering this is an org, there was quite a few of those. So, honestly, not a bad idea. We saw Tuckle try and do this in Season 20 Olympus, and I don't know why I said try, because, I mean, they successfully did it, and Tuckle went on to win the game, with that alliance being one of two dominant warring factions throughout the game. So maybe Alexandria could have a similar trajectory to Tuckle, but I feel like we're more likely looking at the Phil trajectory. Um, it's worth noting that this is the first org she's ever played, so it's always interesting to see how new org players do. Seventh, we have someone who has been a top contender all season, who has had a super rough start to the merge. That would be Yari. And this tier are people who I think on paper should make it farther, but I'll kind of view as threats who I just don't really see making it to the end. Uh, Yari is such an obvious example of that. I do think she could make it further than the person above her and the person below her, but the issue with Yari is that she's gonna need to win Final Four or Final Five immunity, or both, maybe even six in there as well. And I just don't think she has the capability to be able to do that. And with many of our potential allies, which are the people I've talked about so far, Sans Knight, going out soon, most likely, it's just not a good spot to be in. She's gonna need to use that idol ASAP, probably at the merge boot, even if she doesn't need it, which she most likely won't, which would then just take away that safety. She wants to use it to get rid of that target, but objectively, I don't think that's a good idea. Because people are, I mean, she could always be blindsided if she holds on to it. But generally, I think it's a better idea to keep it and use it as a bargaining chip to get people not to target you. Now, we do live in a post-546 world where 5 people went out with idols in their pockets. So people are a bit more concerned about wasting idol. Well, not wasting, but going out with idols. So I get that. And hell, we just saw the only two other idols so far this season go out back to back without playing them, and Balko and Festin. So I can understand why you'd want to play it. But for the most part, I just think it's a better idea to consolve the thing. But with that said, final person rounding up out this tier. At number 6, we have Georgie, who fucking sank so far down 2 episodes ago because I was so certain he was going to be idled out by Preston. But since, Preston didn't play the idol, Georgie shot back up to around 5th, 4th on the power ranking. He's been floating around in that spot all season. He's very obviously a threat. He hasn't done a very good job socially with some of the new people he's meeting. I know the likes of Bass is already so annoyed with Georgie. Georgie's talking to him in a way where it seems like Georgie thinks he's far above him, positioning wise and socially, which I mean he's kind of right, but he's not doing it in a good way. I mean, you shouldn't showcase that to someone whatsoever. But that's holding Georgie a lot. Natalie has been growing apart from him for a while, which is not good, obviously. Um, He also has that rivalry with Alexander, which I think he's eventually going to try and do something about at the final 7 or so. Target Alexander. That's going to blow up on Georgie, and Georgie might go out. Still, he's someone who's had a ton of power throughout the game, is a big figure, still has good social connections for the most part, but I just don't really see a way for him to win. And honestly, if he makes the end, I think we could see a scenario where he's a competitive second placer, but not quite the winner. It is worth noting, and I didn't touch on this a couple people ago, that Georgie has been brought into an alliance. I guess I did talk about Alexander trying to gather a bunch of people. Uh, a core has been formed between Georgie, Alexandra, and Samoyed. Yeah, Samoyed. It's not Samoyed, it's Samoyed. He just yelled at people in tribe chat for getting it wrong. So it's Samoyed, guys. But yeah, Georgie. Oh, final thing for Georgie is that they have a very, very, very strong pre-game connection with Alexandra. This connection, I thought it was not as close as it appears to be, but these two pretty much instantly linked up. They might be number ones, if not like each other's number twos. So that's gonna be interesting to see how that shakes out. Um, I just got pinged by fucking Georgie as I'm talking about this. The puzzle of death didn't work. The command. I gave the wrong command prompt, so I'm just fucking stupid. So, whoops. Let's see how he does in the puzzle of death. I bet he does fucking terrible. I mean, I don't know how he's gonna do. I'm just mean. Okay, next tier. This tier is the only one not to have 3 people in it. It has 2. And it's at 5th, we have Garnet. And it was very close between Garnet and the next person. You'll notice that the top of this ranking is all of the Greps in one Allen, and the bottom is all of the Allens in one Grep. And also the top has a ton of Charlies. But Garnet, it's close between him and the next person. You should know who the next person is if you've spectated the season, looked at power rankings, looked at initial merge dynamics. The reason why Garnet is below this other person, despite being on top of him for every single episode, sans the very last one before this, is because Garnet, one of the big advantages they had over this person was their social connections to the likes of Alexandra and then Alexander at the swap were superior. But now we're kind of seeing this next person, I don't know why I'm even trying to hide who it is, really solidify better relationships with Alexandra again, as well as Alexander kind of stealing Garnet's spot away in that group, and also Natalie, who is in a very great spot. So this 4th person, they go hand in hand. Samoyed, I have him at 4th. I would not have predicted to have him at that spot, given how rough the Ori game is. I had theorized that he could see the Ellie trajectory, like we saw in Season 23, where she started out in a dog shit position, got a great swap, and then it was just up from there. Samoyed kind of had a similar scene, but without the good swap. In fact, it was a bad swap that did start to look up by the end of the round, end of the cycle. So hopefully he can bring that trajectory just to continue going up, going into the future of the merge. I do think that there is concern of Natalie mentioning that Samoyed is such an obvious threat who everyone is going to want to take fall and cut around 5 or 6. So that's a concern. But I think Natalie is the only one who's super concerned about this. And she's also going to need shields in the game, given how obviously good socially she is. But with that, we come into our top tier, which is actually just 3 I had at the top of the power rankings slash contenders at the end of episode 7. This ranking is based on a day into the merge. Just a day into the merge. Yeah. It's not after a first tribal or right when they merge. It's once we've had a little bit of time to understand the dynamics, but not too much where this becomes boring and stagnant. But top 3, it's just a matter of ordering them. In alphabetical order, it's Alexander, Jack, and Natalie. 3 people from OG Charlie. But first off, at third, we have Jack. And Jack actually is third on where I put him on Edge of Contenders as well. Jack has some awesome things going for him, and also some bad things. And both of those things I would say are double-edged swords. For one, he has a great relationship with Alexander, but also he's kind of been replaced, and that's not too much, but a little bit. He has good relationships with Alexandra and Yali, who are people I thought would get a lot of heat at the start of the merge, so that wouldn't be good for Jack. He does have other bonds he can pivot to, but I do think he'll be towards the bottom of those power structures. He's also very obviously the best comp player here, which might get him targeted at some point. I do have a habit of underestimating comp sets. I guess not a habit because it only really happened last season, but I underestimated high space. So I'm not going to do that this time with Jack. I think I've very much so given him his flowers. He's played a really good game. Only person to have 2 fails the episode so far, but due to how obviously he is good at comps and also losing some of his closest allies at the merge, I believe, hard to put him much higher. So then the top 2 are the 2 people I have had in the top. They've been in the top 3 for every single episode of the season, and they've been the top 2 for the last 3 episodes. So once again, it's just a matter of ordering them, and once again, this ranking is going to look so much like Edgic recently, as number 2 is going to be Alexander, and number 1 is going to be Natalie. So Alexander is the biggest flaws that I have to address with his game is that he's a bit more obviously of a threat than Natalie is. And I think Natalie is like more of a social threat that you notice, but Alexander has more of a strategic edge to him, I would say, at least in the way he engages with you in conversation, which I think Natalie's better strategically, but just in the way they come across, Natalie can be a lot more over the top, which I think also gels with this cast better. But Alexander's position is great. He's kind of the second. He's the right-hand man to Natalie, who obviously is at number 1. I do think the rivalry with Georgie could be an issue, but like I said, I think Alexander would win that battle. I think it's very likely one of these people in this top 2 wins and the other gets 4th or 5th, and then like the other 4th or 5th place was like Yali or something. So I'm very high in Alexander's game, but not as high as I am on Natalie's game. And yeah, her social game is just fucking incredible. That is something I expected coming into this game, given the fact that I made her my winner pick. I'm expecting great things from her. Pretty much everyone gets along with her. Alexander has her as his number 1. Alexandra gets great vibes from her. Garnet trusts her. Samoy trusts her. Georgie has her as his number 1. Knight feels the same. I mean, every single person feels good with Natalie. I think she's gonna get along with Yali. It's to the sense that she almost has too many good allies, which is a concern that some players have about themselves. But Natalie hasn't quite addressed that as much as those people have. I think that's partially because it's just not going to be as much of an issue for her. Because I think if you get cut by Natalie, you're not going to be offended by it. You might be a little, but it's just going to be like, oh, everyone kind of knows she has friends, a lot of friends in this game, but she's just so well positioned socially that shouldn't matter. I also think that she will be able to win comps more likely in the end than some of these other big social players like Yari, I don't think can. And also, I just think Natalie is the player of the season so far. That's what I'm saying coming into the merge. I think hopefully that take ages well. I do think her position is very similar to how Zach's was coming into the merge, which I mean I said that Zach kind of blew it with some bad moves. Hopefully Natalie doesn't do the same. Sorry about that, Zach. If she does, it'd be very funny. But Natalie is my pick at this point to win the game. And finally, last thing I want to address before I do an outro is that something fun I've been doing throughout the main changes in the game, as in end of the forced drive cycle and then end of the swap. I predict who would be on the DVD cover of the season if I was to pick who the six would be now. So, if I was to do that right now, put a gun to my head, I have to pick six no matter what. It actually does get a bit tricky. I think obviously you gotta lock in the Charlie three of Natalie, Alexander, and Georgie. This three has been running the game with their tight three-person alliance. I mean, you couldn't not have those three. Dolly is my fourth. She's been a main character, a main contender. She has an idol. She's been giving confessionals more than most people. Very obvious pick. Now, I think for the last two, there's like four people you could justify. Previously, I would have said Bass would have gotten this spot, but I think with his position getting worse and therefore likely leading to him going out pretty early in the merge, he's kind of lost that spot, but gain it back, obviously. So the last two spots come down to Alexandra, Samoyed, and Garnet. And I think if I had to pick two of them, I'd probably say Samoyed and Garnet, just because I think Alexandra is more likely to go home. But I very well could see a scenario where it's one of this duo makes it on, and then Alexandra is the final spot. Or, yeah, I think between the two, it's more likely Samoyed. But I'm going to say Natalie, Alexander, Georgie, Jolly, Samoyed, Garnet as my final prediction for the final DVD couple. But Garnet can kind of be swapped out for Alexandra or maybe Bass. But with all that said, I've kind of talked about every single thing I want to address, and in about, God, bad math, a third of the time we did last season. So that's, hey, good on me. Still a very long video. My bad making you listen to this. It'll be very interesting to readdress these thoughts once we get to the next video I will be making, which will be at the end of, right after we have our sixth placer. So we're going into our final five. The idea there would be to address every single possible FTC combination, who would vote who would win, what the final vote count would be. So look forward to that in 2 weeks or so, I would say. But with that said, I don't really think I have much else to address. The season's it's been a middling season so far. I'll say that. I think a lot of our pre-merge boots were just not very prominent, which I guess could be a good thing, because it means that the bigger players are getting volatile, but typically you get more balance. And then when you do get the balance and have Preston go out at the end, it kind of stings a bit. I would prefer other people to go, but I think this on the road to being a good season, but not a great one. I'd say it'll probably end up like I will 8-bit and Konoha all maybe on the rankings. I don't know. Don't want to give too much of that away because I need to do that video eventually. But with that said, I mean I've started giving you an outro like 3 times and not done it, so like I guess I gotta kind of fucking do it. I don't know what I'm gonna say. See, I don't like intros and outros, dude. Also, like, fucking tangent. I hate introducing myself to people. That shit sucks. But, my mic seems to cut out every 20 minutes, and we just hit the 40-minute mark. So before that shit happens again, I'm gonna stop the recording. So, goodbye. Bye-bye.